In this guide, you're going to learn the best way to macro in low elo. Tell me if these problems don't sound familiar. You try heading into a side lane only for your entire team to immediately get caught out and die. You make a call to take Baron only for your teammates to ignore you, run it down mid and die again. Or maybe you've learned that fancy concept of lane priority. So you make the call to take something like Dragon with it only for none of your teammates to react, and so now you're the one who's dying. This is what we're gonna fix in today's guide. We'll be giving you macro tactics that work in low elo regardless of what your teammates are doing, so that you don't have to rely on them whatsoever. And that's kind of our whole thing here at Skill Capped. We teach you the game from the average player's perspective, you know, where you have terrible teammates you're forced to carry. And we've done a truly massive update for Season 14 with brand new courses on macro, wave control, trading, settings and hotkeys, CSing, vision, mechanics, the list goes on. We even just released 4 multi-chapter massive courses where we teach you how to carry as a mid laner, a jungler, a top laner, and an AD carry with support on its way. And you can try all of this out completely risk-free, since if you don't rank up while actively using Skill Capped, you get your money back, no questions asked. We can offer this because our service really does work. You can unlock all of this through the exclusive discount you can only access through the link below. So what are you waiting for? Click the link in the description below to get the rank you've always wanted this season. Alright, now the first thing you need to understand about macro in low elo is the power of a knowledge check. A good example of a knowledge check is the standard level 2 all-in. If you have the push advantage at level 1 and are going to hit level 2 first, you're basically knowledge checking the opponent. Are you aware which minion will spike level 2 on you? If they get the answer wrong, it usually results in a massive advantage for you. Here's what's important for you to understand though, it's how passing a knowledge check yourself isn't nearly as impactful. If the opponent has the push advantage level 1 and they knowledge check the level 2 all in on you, well, guess what happens if you pass it? Nothing. Everything stays the same. This is why when it comes to low elo macro, the goal is to be proactively knowledge checking opponents with macro choices that massively set them behind if they get it wrong. At the same time, the knowledge check has to be completely in your hands. Bad knowledge checks in low elo are going to be questions that rely on your teammates to get right as well. A common example of this is lane priority. Let's say you're a jungler and both you and the enemy path topside. You could have your top lane and mid lane pushing, both having lane priority to react to a fight at the scuttle first. So you go for that scuttle only for none of your teammates to react and you die 1v1. You correctly knowledge check the enemy jungler. Do you know you lack lane priority so you can't go for the scuttle, but to actually punish him correctly required your teammates to also be aware of the knowledge check. Lucky for you, there is one specific macro tactic that knowledge checks the opponents and doesn't require any reliance on your teammates in low elo. The macro tactic you're going to learn in this guide to dominate low elo games is none other than the side lane push. Now, all the games you're going to be learning from in this guide are from real silver games played solo. I also purposely chose champions and roles that are traditionally thought of as being weak at pushing side lanes just to prove how powerful this tactic can be on any champion or role. For example, I played some games as AD carry in bot lane, since having a support is going to result in me losing lane in a bunch of games. And as an AD carry, I'm going to be underleveled compared to the solo laners when I do head into a side lane. I also made sure to pick the literal lowest win rate AD carry on the patch, Kai'Sa. And I already anticipated some of you would rightly complain that Kai'Sa is still too good at dueling, so I also ran games on Caitlyn, another extremely low win rate champion who is much weaker in side lane 1v1s, as well as Sivir, who isn't exactly seen as a great dueler. I even played some games as a jungler to prove it can still work if you're not a laner, and some games as a control mage mid, as most players find it impossible to side lane with the lack of mobility. So let's get into it. When you push a side lane, there are a couple of knowledge checks that will occur. The first one is simply asking the enemy team if they know to send someone to defend. When the enemy team fails this knowledge check, it's always beneficial to you. Yes, even if your entire team dies. I'll prove it. At the start of the sequence, our team has 35,600 gold and the enemy has 34,100. Essentially, our team is ahead 1,500 gold. So we push a side lane, and instead of reacting to us, the enemy team collapses on our teammates. The worst possible outcome occurs with our entire team dying. Now, at the end of the sequence, our team has 38,400 gold and the enemy has 36,900. Wow, our team is still ahead 1,500 gold. Yet, there's a key difference. In this time, we actually gained 1,300 gold directly on ourselves out of the 2,800 our team gained. Meanwhile, the 2,800 gold the enemy gained is spread out amongst their team. Tryndamere gained 680, Echo gained 871, Corki gained 471, Caitlyn gained 545, and Zyra gained 365. What this means is despite the worst case scenario of our entire team getting wiped, we still became stronger than every person on the enemy team by the end of the sequence. And it's important to understand how gold funneled onto a single player scales due to how items work. Firstly, items get a massive power spike once you actually complete them. So when you funnel gold directly on one person, they can get to these item completions faster. Secondly, often the stats items provide actually scale off each other to become even stronger. For example, critical strike strike scales off attack damage, since it's a percentage increase. Attack speed scales off attack damage and vice versa. The more you have of one, the more powerful it makes the other. Ability haste and ability power have a similar interaction for spell casters. An easier way of understanding this is just imagining one person with 5 completed items and boots versus 5 players with boots and 1 completed item each. That one player is going to be a raid boss and just wipe the entire enemy team. This concept forms the foundation of this macro tactic of pushing side lanes. If the enemy team ever fails to send a defender, we'll always come out ahead, even in the worst case scenario of our teammates dying, since we're always going to generate more gold on ourselves, making us more powerful than any of the other enemies and putting us in a better position to carry. I really want to hammer this home because the biggest macro mistake low elo players make is not understanding how valuable it is when you push a lane and no one defends, which causes them to group unnecessarily, thinking they have to fight because their teammates are. By using this push tactic consistently, it will result in 3 outcomes that let you carry and win games in low elo. 1, you'll eventually be so farmed that once you do inevitably teamfight, you can just carry with how ahead in gold you are. 2, you're so strong in the side lane that whenever an enemy tries to defend you, you just pick up free kills, getting free number advantages. Or 3, you'll be so strong in the side lane, the enemy stops sending anyone to defend you, and so you just straight up end the game. Also, it's not like the worst case scenario happens every time. Sometimes you get good scenarios like this. Here, mid is our only empty lane, so we start pushing that, and no one defends. We're able to get 2 of the towers and a ton of minions, and during that time, we get a winning 1-for-2 trade bot side. The enemy team then collapses on our top lane, but that again leaves open mid, so we get once again a ton of minions, a kill on the defender Lux, into a wave bot side. We literally just generated 2,000 gold on ourselves, while the enemy only got 3,000 gold total to our team's 5,200 gold total. Basically, when you push an empty lane by yourself, you are knowledge checking the enemy team if they know to send a defender. In low elo, teams constantly fail this simple knowledge check, and no matter what, it will always be massively beneficial to you when they do. Great, so by pushing a lane, we start with a simple knowledge check of, do you know to send a defender? If they get it wrong, we always come out ahead. However, even when they do send a defender, this is a different knowledge check they have to get right, sending a defender that can actually, well, defend. Often, low elo players will fail this simple check too. For example, here I'm playing Diana jungle. I notice a matchup I easily win against Lucian in the side lane, so I head there. There's really not much to say here. This is just Lucian not respecting someone stronger than him is missing on the map while he's overextended. I then push aggressively. In this case, the enemy Vi tries to collapse, again not respecting the fact they can't actually defend against me 1v1. And again, pushing, the enemy sends a weak defender again, Lucian, that I can 1v1, so it's an easy punish with a tower dive. This will all change right here though. Despite getting massively fed off all this side laning, again I spot Lucian in bot lane and I'm heading there to push. This time he correctly runs away knowing he can't defend. And finally, they send someone who can actually defend against me, their fed Camille. And surprise surprise, we easily die 1v1. Basically every game there will be some matchups you'll win when pushing and some you're gonna lose. You're gonna have to develop the skill to hunt for these favored matchups, but there's a simple way to do this. If we go back to the first clip, as we're leaving base, we hit tab and check the state of ourselves and each enemy champion. You basically just look at 2 things, levels and items. We're level 12 and have 2 completed items, along with a needlessly large rod. If we look at the enemy team, we're ahead of each of them in levels except for Camille, and we're ahead in items on everyone, but again, Camille, who's around even with us. This is how we know we should likely win 1v1 against everyone except for Camille. We're close to even, so that's when it comes down to matchup knowledge. And so, as we're leaving base, what do we see on the map? Camille topside. This is how we know it's safe to just run it down bot. We're confident we'll win every 1v1, so it's an easy kill on Lucian. It's the same thing with the Vi kill or identifying our threats on the map. Camille being topside, so we're pushing aggressively, hunting for those favorable 1v1s. Same with the Lucian tower dive. We saw Camille top. That's how we knew it was safe to push aggressively and force the enemy into a knowledge check where they send the wrong defender. Yet, look at the scoreboard right before we fight Camille. We're basically dead even with Camille in terms of levels and items. And as we're pushing, she's completely missing from the map, and yet when we do finally see her, I actually choose to fight her despite me clearly losing after. So what's going on here? Well, this is basically matchup knowledge, and I don't play Diana jungle or Camille top, so I don't know how this should play out if we're even in gold this late into the game. I do know Camille is supposed to be a late game beast with her Q, and that in theory she should counter me due to me being more burst reliant and her being a bruiser. However, it's always best to just find out if you truly have never tried the matchup before. I highly recommend if you see someone close to you in items and levels, you just fight them 1v1. This is called limit testing and how you develop matchup knowledge for the future. You basically just int and make a few games harder in the short term to improve and win more games in the long term. Okay, so here's basically what you need to take away. First, when you push and no one sends a defender, it's always a win for you. Second, when you push, you hunt for favorable matchups in the side lanes. Notice how the tough matchup Camille, I literally just pathed away from. And yes, that meant my teammates just inted her on repeat. That's okay. I'm not joking, by the way. This Camille just feasted on my teammates like over and over and over again. But I still ended up winning the game in the end with the macro tactic you're learning. You really don't want to make the mistake of sitting on the back foot trying to play defense against a bad matchup, holding their push. If I did that, I wouldn't have gotten massively ahead by farming Camille's weak teammates, putting me in a position to carry and win. Remember what we taught you first about knowledge checks and the level 2 all in. Knowledge checks will work best best when you're the one asking the question. When the enemy gets to knowledge check you, well, even if you get it right, you don't get any kind of advantage. And don't worry, very soon I'll be going over what to do when the enemy sends the right person to defend and you can't kill them. For now, just know we have 2 easy punishes off 2 failed knowledge checks. The enemy doesn't defend and the enemy sends too weak of a defender. So next, let's talk about the next way the enemy will fail your knowledge check. They send multiple defenders. One of the most common outcomes is something like this. Here, I'm pushing as a Nivea in the side lane. The enemy first fails the knowledge check by not sending a defender, no surprise there, and then eventually fails later on by sending multiple defenders. You can see, despite not being able to get a kill, as long as you do your best to waste the maximum amount of the enemy's time as you die, your teammates will be able to always have the option to get something somewhere else on the map since they have a big number advantage there. For example, here, I definitely could have just grouped with my team as we were ahead enough to win a dragon fight, but I really wanted to show how powerful this concept can be. So I purposely split to force multiple defenders to kill me to show how by timing it with my team taking dragon, they can just take it for free. Now, don't worry, I already know you're thinking that your teammates will not do that. They'll just run around like chickens with their heads cut off, getting nothing done while you die. Yes, that will happen. Let me show you why this is still a good thing for you. Here, I'm pushing topside. I get a good matchup into the enemy Caitlyn that I can kill. However, the enemy team then decides to send multiple defenders to make up for that. I ended up dying, but let's look at what our team decides to do with my pressure. The obvious play would be to use the wave mid to take the mid tower. Instead, our Garen runs topside and just ins for a kill. Lex runs topside to get her steps in and do a whole lot of nothing. Shaco steals the red from the enemy, and Diana heads to farm bot side. Things aren't looking too good, and they're about to get even worse. Right as we respawn, we can see Lux and Diana are feeling charitable as they die for free overextended for pretty much no reason, and naturally immediately throw up a surrender. So how in the world is this a good thing? Well, often when you push up a lane like this and bait multiple enemies to respond, the enemy won't be in a good position to immediately punish you on your death timer, because positionally they're just really far off the map since they're basically in their own base. For example, imagine if I died defending my mid tower instead. Well, that's incredibly easy for the enemy team to do a wide variety of things off that death timer since they're at the center of the map. They could just rotate to Baron to try and force it. They can continue pushing to take towers, maybe an inhibitor. When you're the one pushing, it means the multiple champions the enemy sent will be off the map after you die. Additionally, if you look at the map from the enemy's perspective, it's just straight up hard to make the correct call as a team that fast before you respawn, let alone in low elo. So often, they'll just push out lanes and waste time, letting you respawn and get back into that side lane. And once again, you see, the enemy sends multiple defenders. I'm able to escape this time. And if we look at our team, they're literally losing 4v3 despite being ahead in numbers and me pulling the strongest members of the enemy team. I then unfortunately trade 1-for-1 in the split, but you can still see how awkward of a spot this puts the enemy. It's really hard to have a clean winning fight for them when you're down numbers and your strongest members aren't there. They call for Baron, but Caitlyn's and half HP. The fight took so long, or Garen has respawned and heading to defend. The enemy Corki decides to recall. It's just typical low elo chaos. Basically, when the enemy sends multiple defenders, they can't be too weak, or you could just end up 1v2ing or getting some sort of highly favorable trade. So the only way to defend you is to send someone strong enough to actually beat you, or just a ton of their teammates. Well, ideally, you waste their time by either escaping or trading kills. Both puts them off the map and gives your team a big advantage. And it's not really about your team getting stuff, it effectively just stalls the game, since the enemy will struggle to get anything meaningful off your death as they're far off the map. This is why sending multiple people fails the knowledge check. Even if your teammates run around like headless chickens, it doesn't actually stop you. You'll just end up back in the side lane once you respawn, forcing them into the same knowledge checks once again. And all it takes is that one time for your teammates to literally do anything useful. Like, check out this case. I'm literally pulling the entire enemy team, and that same Diana and Garen that seemed clueless before just happened to be pushing lanes, and so we get 2 towers and an inhibitor. Of course, they immediately die after for no apparent reason, along with their Shaco too. But again, the enemy has no time to take anything off these death timers since we're dying when we're pushed up. So back in the side lane we go. The enemy mistakenly tries to force Baron, not realizing they don't have time, and so it's an easy backdoor finish to actually end the game. By pushing and pulling enemies, you're basically making the game easy mode for your teammates. For example, here I start out in mid with my team. No need to be grouped here when I have empty side lanes I can push, so off to the top lane we go. In the meantime, our teammate Udyr dies mid, and then Garen shortly after. None of this matters once we get our push going though. The first knowledge check is failed. No defender is sent, that's free minions and towers. Second knowledge check is failed. They send someone who can't actually defend. Free kill for us. Meanwhile, now our team is getting free kills mid since Fiora isn't there. Third knowledge check is failed. They send multiple defenders, and we're even able to trade 1-for-1. Now our team is getting a free mid tower. Back in the side lane we go. Again, ignoring that Fiora bot side. We want to be the one knowledge checking, not responding to theirs if we can help it. Enemy fails the first knowledge check, not responding. That's free minions and towers. Enemy fails the second knowledge check, sending multiple to defend. That's a free kill for our team mid with the numbers advantage. Enemy fails a third knowledge check, sending someone to collapse on me that can't even 1v1 me. Enemy fails a fourth knowledge check, sending no one to defend. That's a free tower. And the enemy fails a fifth knowledge check in a row, sending multiple, so I trade 1-for-1. Meanwhile, our team gets a free dragon into a kill on Viego with their number advantage. Now, some of you are probably wondering at this point, what should they have done? Well, simply send someone who can clear a minion wave from the safety of their tower. Ahri could just hold all her spells, cast Q, and clear nearly the entire wave instantly. This would prevent me from being able to tower dive her or get that much damage on the tower. Also, high elo Ahris nearly always take teleport. This allows you to hold waves and then still have teleport to react to any roams the enemy would make. This Ahri took ignite. You can see how this simple macro tactic just exploits so many mistakes low elo players make. I really can't overemphasize just how effective this is in low elo. For example, here I'm mid. I see a fight topside in our jungle, but I ended up getting collapsed on. Our job is simple. They sent multiple people, so we either want to escape or trade one for one. In this case, I need to escape. You can see how low elo players constantly tunnel vision on trying to chase, and so that actually lets our team get a temporary number advantage fight and gets a huge shutdown on Mordekaiser. I then notice the enemy is no longer chasing me, so back to pushing a lane to try and pull pressure. They should just do Baron here, then they can reset or try to collapse on me after, but again, this tactic just abuses low elo players. Akshan tunnels on the kill, failing the knowledge check of whether he can 1v1. This then baits Teemo to try and kill me, which pulls him off Baron, and now Baron is taking so long, it actually sets up a hilarious Baron steal from our Lux, into then having our teammates clean up a ton of kills after, literally swinging the game completely. This is why this macro tactic is so powerful. It constantly forces knowledge checks on the opponent, setting them up to just shoot themselves in the foot. Also, now's a good time to mention, if you want to know the best counter to this kind of macro playstyle, well, it's simply having solid macro fundamentals. Low elo players completely lack it, which is what we're abusing. And there's really no better way to learn this than our new Season 14 macro course. It has nearly perfect 5-star reviews and just passed over 1 million views on our website. You can check it out with the discount link below. Great, so we've gone through a bunch of great scenarios where things go right, but what about when they go wrong? It's not like you're always exiting your laning phase with a lead and can just immediately start 1v1ing opponents. So let's cover that. What to do when you're either behind or the enemy is just doing a good job sending defenders that can kill you or actually defend. So here I'm leaving base. Our team is currently behind nearly 4k gold. For full transparency, my top lane is behind 2700 gold. My jungler is ahead 700. My mid is behind 600. I'm ahead 100 and my support is behind 1.2k. In other words, I'm behind or even with everyone in the game except for a Wukong jungle, which I'm only 200 gold ahead of, while being a squishy AD carry with 1 item completed. I probably can't 1v1 anyone at this point. Still, nothing's gonna change. Off into the empty side lane we go. Take a look at the map. The real scary guys, Mordekaiser and Akshan, are both showing mid. Cool, so we can keep pushing. I spot Jhin and Wukong at Dragon 2. Great, we can keep pushing. It's important to note, their Teemo support can definitely 1v1 me at this point, but Teemo isn't the type of champion to just always be able to engage on me and run me down. There's a chance I'd be able to escape. It'd be the same if Jhin was the one missing. Also, you just have to take some risk when you're this far behind. As we covered earlier, it's not the end of the world if you end up dying when pushing, since it will take any enemies that collapsed on you off the map. And great, as is typical in low elo, they failed the first knowledge check and didn't send a defender. Now, here's what's different. At this point, a lot of threats are missing. Mordekaiser, Akshan, and Wukong. At the same time, my teammates aren't pressuring anything on the map, so if I keep pushing, I'm basically just putting a giant spotlight on myself asking to get collapsed on. And I'm too weak to fight anyone that will come. So, in spots like these, you just fall back into a recall so you can spend your gold. Notice how I'm now much further ahead of Jhin, Teemo, and Wukong in gold. Just like we taught you earlier, when no one responds, it's a big win for you. Here's what's important though. Off that recall, you've now just spent a ton of your gold. So you're often even further ahead of enemies than you realize when you get back onto the map, since players will often be sitting on a lot of unspent gold. This is part of the reason why the first thing we do is group on mid while we wait for the side lanes to open up. Going mid first will keep us flexible and has a possibility of getting winning fights. For example, in this game, you'll see that I'm half HP and can't push anymore as it's too risky. So it's time to recall to spend my gold. I then immediately head mid with all my gold spent, and notice how by pushing bot, it lures someone there. So often, by the time you get mid, they're still pushing that side lane, giving you a number advantage in mid lane, setting up winning fights for you. In this game though, despite having a number advantage mid off that tactic, Mordekaiser is way too fed, so we wouldn't be able to win even with the number advantage. So when you don't get that play mid, you want to pay attention to the lane you originally pushed. Often in low elo, players will overextend in that lane when they push back. With seeing a ton of enemies bot side and Mordekaiser mid, we switch our pick here to Akshan with our number advantage. Now, if you're in this position and don't have a teammate to help collapse and you can't win 1v1, it is okay to just pick up the wave. Often, the enemy will roam off the push, letting you go back into your own push, letting you knowledge check them for defender. Regardless though, you'll end up in a spot like this, where you're back to pushing an empty lane. You always want to be on the lookout, by the way, to steal camps in between minion waves, as they can act as an in-between move while you wait to see if a threat is coming to match you. You can see in this case, Mordekaiser did, so we have to recall. Now with our gold spent and second item completed, we can look for a potential number advantage fight mid, as their strongest member Mordekaiser is pushing back top. And this forms the typical macro sequence when you're behind. You push a side lane, no one defends, that gets you back in the game. You push a side side lane, someone defends you can't beat, so you recall to spend gold. You then group mid and often get a winning fight with a number advantage. If you don't get that number advantage fight mid, you look forward in the side lanes. It's usually the guy who's pushing your wave back, and you just repeat this, stalling the game and getting yourself ahead. You'll become stronger and stronger over time, letting you win 1v1s you previously lost, which then sets up the enemy to fail knowledge checks around setting strong enough defenders. And yes, that will even mean sometimes having to give up Baron, but again, you're funneling a ton of gold on yourself, making yourself stronger and stronger, until eventually that super fed enemy that you couldn't even look at before, you'll be in position to not only 1v1, but even 1v2, becoming the strongest champion in the game. Now, this sounds great and all, but let's address the biggest problem you're going to run into in low elo solo queue. Sometimes your teammates will literally refuse to listen and won't even let you side lane by yourself. For example, here I'm leaving lane, and again, we always default to heading mid, as we can then pivot to any place on the map. I see Diana go mid, Shaco is bot, this means top lane is our open lane. Great, let's get our side laning going. Well, our Garen has other plans. Despite bot lane now being open, he is determined to lane top for absolutely no reason. So now I'm stuck splitting tower gold and minions. This is not good. You need to rotate off this and just let your teammate go top for now. So I head mid, but this is really just an in-between move. I really want to get to the empty side lane bot. So I finish pushing this next wave to set up my rotation, and off to bot we go. Oh, and now our Diana is teleporting in, so we can't go bot either. In spots like these, I highly recommend trying to farm camps in between waves if you can. It will passively put you ahead of other players who are also farming minions at this time. You basically just continue to do this until either, one, the enemy leaves mid open. For example, here I'm playing Anivia, and I even type and ask my bot lane to swap with me, but as to be expected, often you're going to be ignored. I even spam ping they're being ganked bot, but they still try to defend their tower and end up dying. Doesn't matter though, in the meantime, I know that the enemy failed their knowledge check by not sending a defender mid, so I just get tons of free minions and a tower. The second scenario is a side lane finally opens up for you, in which case you're going to rotate to it. In this game, our Garen now decided to lane mid for whatever reason. Great, we can head top. Time to side lane. Oh wait, now Garen is back in our lane again. No point in pushing, so we recall. Looks like we're going to be repeating this until we get a side lane open or they leave mid open. However, here we see Garen recalling, so we just cancel ours, and finally we're in our side lane push. However, we're sitting on a ton of gold while also not having enough for our next item completion. You need to be on the lookout for spots like these where you're close to your next big item spike. You can look to push and then farm camps between waves, and overall you just want to play a bit passive as you look to farm up your next spike. Great, we now have exactly enough for our next item, so you know what to do. Recall, spend our gold, and head on to mid. And what do you know? Just like we taught you, we get an easy number advantage fight with our huge item spike. And off this, we can then transition back into our side lane push, which actually transitions to a clip you saw earlier where the enemy failed the knowledge check of defending and we got even further ahead from it. Basically, you saw how literally we had to deal with our teammates not letting us side lane for 3 minutes straight. Sometimes that's going to happen, but don't lose patience or get tilted. Eventually, a side lane will open up, you'll still be able to stall the game and get super strong and be able to carry. Now, there are 2 mistakes you need to avoid when executing this macro strategy. First is often you'll become so strong, you'll become overconfident. Like in this game, I got massively far ahead, saw a low health auction, ult in, next thing you know, I'm 1v5 inting throwing the game. Somehow the enemy doesn't end, so I get a second chance, and what do? I don't learn my lesson. Time to ult in again to the entire enemy team and just straight up int. Basically, despite split pushing, literally turning this entire game around for me, I randomly decide to start team fighting, which isn't always bad in and of itself, but it sure is bad if you're just brute forcing fights like this. I made the same mistake in the previous Diana game where I was crushing the game through split pushing. Then all of a sudden at full build, I decided now's my time to group and force team fights. Instead of just continuing to push the side lane, you know, the entire strategy that's been winning me the game so far. And you can see how even when you're massively ahead and get good fights, if your team is just that far behind, grouping is not going to work. So be careful about getting overconfident and grouping when pushing the side lane is working great for you, especially when the rest of the team is behind. The second mistake to avoid has to do with itemization. You know, in that game where I was finally able to 1v1 Mordekaiser despite him being insanely fed all game? Well, I actually lost that game in the end, solely due to an itemization mistake. You can see how we're in what looks to be a great base race, since I should be able to 1v1 the Mordekaiser, their only defender. Instead, I just get demolished. In no small part to misplays mechanically, but my god, was this way harder than it should have been due to the items I built. This then let the enemy run down mid off my death timer and end the game. Basically, Mordekaiser build items to counter me in the 1v1, specifically a Randu and Zoman, and I'm not doing that. It's important to recognize when you're facing a fed enemy that's going to be matching you in the side lane and itemize to counter them. Just to give you an idea of what I could have built instead, while Phantom Dancer should have definitely been a Blade of the Rune King, this would give me % health damage to better counter Mordekaiser's health stacking, also giving me a slow to help kite. Then, instead of a shield bow as my final item, a Maw of Malmortius would have been far better, giving me a similar shield but providing some much needed magic resistance to counter Mord. Even Mercurial Scimitar would have been better, although it no longer removes Mordekaiser's ultimate, still removes all crowd control while giving you a 50% movement speed boost. This would help me kite as well, while also giving a good amount of magic resist. There's even good synergy with Wit's End, helping me stack attack speed for my passive procs while giving me magic resist too. I mean, even building something like Kanik Rookern would have been a better choice, as it would hard counter Mordekaiser. Basically, you need to recognize when you're in a game where your team is massively gapped and you won't be team fighting. You want to stick to side laning, identify the main threat on the enemy team, and look to itemize to hard counter them. Also, quick bonus tip here, if you're in a role like top or mid that takes teleport, it makes the strategy even stronger. You want to be on the lookout for pushed waves. Low elo players will get completely caught off guard by you teleporting in on them into immediately pressuring the tower. They'll either fail to send defenders or end up sending weak defenders you can kill. Now, if you found this guide helpful, then I know you'll absolutely love our hyper improvement service at Skillcapped. We've done a truly massive update for season 14 with brand new courses on macro, wave control, trading, settings and hotkeys, CSing, vision, mechanics, the list goes on. We even just released 4 multi-chapter massive courses where we teach you how to carry as a mid laner, a jungler, a top laner, and an AD carry with support on its way. And you get to try all of this risk-free. Since if you don't rank up while actively using Skillcapped, you get your money back, no questions asked. We can offer this because our service really does work. You can unlock all of this through the exclusive discount you can only access through the link below. So what are you waiting for? Click the link in the description below to get the rank you've always wanted this season. Alright, and that will do it for this one. We here at Skillcapped want to thank you for watching, and we'll catch you in the next one.